Chapter 1. The night she stopped running, rain fell like judgment. Elena pressed her back against the crumbling stone wall, her breath coming in sharp, painful gasps that burned her throat. The alley stretched before her, narrow, dark, slick with water that pooled in ancient cobblestones. She'd run until her legs trembled, until the betrayal that had driven her from her father's house felt like a physical wound beneath her ribs. 3 days ago, she'd been engaged, respected, the daughter of a merchant lord, with a future bright enough to blind. Now she was nothing. A liar. They'd called her a thief. Her own sister had wept false tears while planting evidence in Elena's room, jewelry that had gone missing from the magistrate's wife, coins from the church offering box. All of it carefully hidden where it would be found, where it had been found. The magistrate had given her one night to flee before the warrant was issued. One night, because he'd once danced with her mother at a spring festival. Before the fever took her, Elena's hands shook as she pushed wet hair from her face. The city of Ashenfell spread around her like a labyrinth of secrets, its Gothic spires piercing low clouds, its narrow streets exhaling mist. She'd thought she could disappear here, thought she could survive. She'd been wrong. The footsteps came slowly, deliberately. Not the city watch, she would have heard their boots, their calls. These steps were softer, patient, the footsteps of someone who knew their prey couldn't run anymore. Elena's fingers closed around the small knife she'd stolen from a market stall. It wouldn't be enough. She knew that. But she wouldn't die without fighting. You're bleeding. The voice came from directly behind her. Elena spun, knife raised, and found herself staring at a man who shouldn't exist. He stood in the center of the alley, utterly still, unbothered by the rain that soaked through Elena's threadbare cloak. Water ran off him like he was made of marble down the sharp planes of his face, the dark fabric of his coat, the silver buttons that gleamed even in the shadows. His hair was black as the spaces between stars, his skin pale as winter moonlight. His eyes were the color of old blood. You're hurt, he said again. And his gaze dropped to her arm, where her sleeve had torn on an iron fence, where blood mixed with rainwater and dripped onto stone. Stay back, Elena's voice cracked. The knife trembled in her grip. The man didn't move. Behind him, 3 figures emerged from the mist, men dressed in clothes too fine for this district, their eyes reflecting light like animals in the dark. They moved with an inhuman grace that made Elena's stomach turn cold. Adrian. One of them spoke, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. You're trespassing. This district belongs to House Corvus by the Treaty of Shadows. You know the law. The man Adrian tilted his head slightly. The treaty allows safe passage. I'm merely passing through. With prey? The speaker smiled, revealing teeth too sharp to white. She's bleeding, old friend. In our territory. That makes her ours by right of blood. Elena's back hit the wall. The knife fell from her nerveless fingers. These weren't men. She'd heard stories, whispered over tavern fires by travelers with haunted eyes. Tales of the night house's vampire courts that ruled Ashenfell's shadows, bound by ancient laws, feeding on those the daylight world cast aside. She'd thought them legends, warnings to keep children indoors after dark. She's human. Adrian's voice had gone very quiet, very cold. The treaty protects humans who haven't consented. She's prey. The vampire took a step forward. Alone, bleeding, running from something. No one will miss her. I will. The words hung in the rain-soaked air. Adrian moved then, and Elena's eyes couldn't track it. One moment he stood in the center of the alley. The next, he was between her and the others, his hand wrapped around her wrist, his touch ice-cold through her wet sleeve. This woman is under my protection, he said. House Nightshade claims her as guest right. Challenge me, Dorian, and you challenge the treaty itself. The vampire called Dorian went very still. Behind him, his companions exchanged glances sharp as drawn blades. You would risk war, Dorian said slowly. For a human? I would risk war, Adrian replied. For the law. The silence stretched. Elena could feel her heartbeat against her ribs, too fast, too loud. Adrian's hand remained on her wrist, not gripping, simply there, a barrier between her and the night that wanted to swallow her whole. Finally, Dorian smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Guest right expires at dawn, Adrian. And winter dawns come late. He stepped back into shadow, his companions following like smoke dissipating. House Corvus will remember this. Then they were gone. Elena's legs gave out. Adrian caught her before she hit the ground. His arms impossibly strong, his body solid, despite looking like he was carved from ice and shadow. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, turning toward the mouth of the alley, where fog rolled thick enough to hide them. Wait, Elena's voice came out broken. What are you? You can't stay here. Adrian's face was unreadable, beautiful and terrible as a statue in a graveyard. They'll return before dawn, with more. And I can't hold House Corvus at bay in their own territory. Where are you taking me? His eyes met hers, and for a moment, Elena saw something ancient looking back, something tired and sad and utterly inhuman. Somewhere safe, he said. For now. The mist swallowed them, and Elena's old life vanished like it had never been real at all. Chapter 2. The House of Shadow. Selena woke to silence, not the comfortable quiet of a sleeping household, but the profound stillness of a place where nothing living breathed. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to darkness broken only by thin strips of moonlight filtering through heavy curtains. She lay in a bed far too soft, under sheets that smelled of lavender and something else, something cold and mineral. Like stones pulled from deep water, memory returned in fragments. The rain, the alley, the vampires with their predator eyes. Adrian carrying her through streets that twisted like a fever dream, his footsteps making no sound on wet cobblestones. A massive iron gate opening without touch. Stone stairs descending into shadow. She sat up carefully, testing her body for damage. Her arm had been bandaged, clean white cloth wrapped expertly around the fence wound. Someone had changed her clothes. The thin nightgown she wore now was finer than anything she'd owned before her fall from grace, silk that whispered against her skin. The room around her was austere but elegant. Stone walls, dark wood furniture, a wardrobe carved with intricate designs she couldn't make out in the dimness. No mirrors. She noticed that immediately, not a single reflective surface anywhere. The door stood slightly ajar. Elena's feet found cold stone floor. She crossed to the door, hesitated, then pushed it open. The corridor beyond belonged in a Gothic novel, vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadow. Walls lined with paintings whose subjects seemed to watch her pass. Sconces holding candles that burned without flickering. The air tasted of age and secrets. She followed the corridor because she had no other choice, her bare feet silent on stone, worn smooth by centuries. Doors lined the passage, all closed. She didn't try them. Something told her that would be a violation. And she'd already trespassed enough by being alive in this place. The corridor opened into a great hall. Elena stopped in the archway, breath-catching. The space was enormous, 2 stories tall, with windows of stained glass that would have been breathtaking in daylight. Now they were dark jewels, barely touched by moonlight. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, cold and empty. Furniture sat in careful arrangements. Chairs that looked older than countries, tables carved from single pieces of wood, bookshelves climbing toward the ceiling. Adrian stood at one of the tall windows, his back to her, utterly motionless. He wore different clothes now, dark trousers, a white shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The casual dress should have made him seem more human. Instead, it emphasized how wrong he was, too still, too perfect, too much like a painting that had learned to stand upright. Your heartbeat gave you away, he said without turning. I heard you wake 3 minutes ago. Elena's hand tightened on the doorframe. Where am I? Nightshade House. My home. He turned then, and moonlight caught his face, turning him into something from a cathedral window, beautiful and untouchable. You're safe here. House Corvus won't breach these walls. Why? The word came out harder than she'd intended. Why did you save me? Something flickered across his expression, too quick for her to name. Would you prefer I hadn't? I prefer answers. Adrian studied her for a long moment, his blood-dark eyes unreadable. Then, surprisingly, his mouth curved into something that might have been a smile on someone more alive. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair near the cold fireplace. If you want answers, you should be comfortable. Elena didn't move. I'll stand. Suit yourself. He crossed to a side table and poured something dark into a crystal glass. Wine, she thought, until she saw how it caught the light. Too thick, too red. Her stomach turned. He noticed her expression. It's wine, he said dryly. I don't drink in front of guests. It's considered poor manners. Do you have many human guests? No. He took a sip, watching her over the rim. You're the first in 60 years. The number hung in the air between them. 60 years, spoken as casually as someone else might say 60 days. Elena felt the weight of it, the vast gulf between her mortal life and whatever he was. The vampires in the alley, she said carefully. They wanted to kill me. Feed, Adrian corrected. Not necessarily kill. though with 3 of them, and you already injured. He trailed off, his expression darkening. Yes, you would have died. And you stopped them because of a treaty? I stopped them because of the law. He set down his glass with deliberate precision. The Treaty of Shadows governs all night houses in Ashenfell. We don't feed on humans without consent. We don't hunt in daylight districts. We don't turn mortals without the Conclave's approval. These rules keep us hidden, keep us safe. Safe from what? His smile was bitter. From you. From humanity, with your fire and your iron, and your absolute certainty that monsters should burn. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. So you saved me to preserve your treaty. I saved you, Adrian said quietly, because Dorian and his house have been looking for an excuse to break the peace for a decade. They want war. They want to return to the old ways, taking what they want, when they want it. If I'd let them kill you, I'd have signaled that house. Nightshade agrees. He moved closer. His footsteps whisper soft. I don't. How noble. Elena's voice shook. And now, what happens to me now? Now you stay here until it's safe. Safe? You said guest right expires at dawn. In their territory. Adrian stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the inhuman stillness of his chest, the way he didn't breathe unless he chose to. Here. You're under House Nightshade's protection. They won't touch you while you're in my custody. Custody. Elena laughed, the sound cracking. I'm a prisoner. You're alive. His voice went sharp. Would you prefer the alternative? The silence stretched between them, broken only by Elena's too fast heartbeat. Finally, Adrian's shoulders dropped, a human gesture that looked strange on him. I'm sorry, he said, and sounded like he meant it. You're not a prisoner. You're a guest. But Ashenfell isn't safe for you anymore. Dorian won't forget. House Corvus holds grudges like other people hold prayers. Elena closed her eyes. She had nowhere to go. No family who would shelter her. No friends who would risk the magistrate's wrath. She was already a fugitive. Now she was something worse, a vampire's protected guest, marked by association with creatures the daylight world called monsters. How long? She whispered. I don't know. Adrian's honesty cut deeper than a lie would have. Until the conclave meets. Until I can negotiate your safe passage out of the city. She opened her eyes and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't name, something like regret. Something like recognition. Get some rest, he said quietly. You're wounded, exhausted. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next. He turned toward the corridor, then paused. Elena? He spoke her name like he'd known it always. You survived betrayal, false accusations, being cast out into a city that devours the vulnerable. You're stronger than you think. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in a hall full of shadows and the cold comfort of a monster's praise. Chapter 3. The rules of Nightlina didn't sleep. She returned to her room as dawn approached, watching through the heavy curtains as gray light crept across Ashenfell's rooftops. The city looked different from this height Nightshade house perched on the edge of the old district, where ancient families had built their estates before the merchant class sprawled outward. From here, she could see the cathedral spires, the market squares, the river, cutting silver through stone, her old life, impossibly distant. When full daylight came, the house changed. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable, a settling, like a great beast falling into deep sleep. The candle flames guttered and died. The shadows thickened in corners. The very air seemed to grow heavier, pressing down with the weight of secrets kept too long. Elena ventured out cautiously. The corridors were empty. She explored carefully, mapping her new prison because that's what it was, no matter how Adrian framed it. The house sprawled larger than she'd imagined. A music room with a dust-covered piano. A library that made her chest ache with longing. A conservatory where dead plants stood in clay pots like skeletal hands reaching toward glass. Everything was beautiful. Everything was abandoned. She found the kitchen by accident, tucked away in the lower levels. It was shockingly normal, clean counters, a stove that looked recently used, cupboards stocked with human food, tea, bread, preserves, cheese. A bowl of apples that were only slightly withered. Elena stared at the apples for a long moment, then laughed, a sharp, slightly hysterical sound that echoed off stone walls. A vampire's house stocked for human guests. Just in case, she made tea because she needed something to do with her shaking hands. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. Elena waking to darkness, exploring while Adrian slept, retreating to her room at dusk before he rose. She saw him only briefly passing in corridors, standing in doorways, always polite, always distant. He asked after her needs. She answered with careful courtesy. Neither mentioned the fundamental strangeness of their situation, but Elena noticed things, the way he moved a fluid. Too quick, catching himself mid-gesture, and forcing human awkwardness into his steps. The way he never ate in her presence, though she found evidence of meals prepared in the kitchen, a wine glass with dark residue, plates scraped clean of something that left rust-colored stains, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. His expression caught between hunger and something gentler. On the fourth night, she found him in the library. He sat in a leather chair, worn soft with age. A book open on his lap, lamplight pooling gold around him. For a moment, he looked almost human, almost like a scholar lost in research. Almost like someone Elena might have met in her old life at one of her father's dinner parties. Then he lifted his head, and his eyes gleamed red in the shadows. "Can't sleep?" His voice was quiet, careful not to startle her. Elena stepped into the library, trailing her fingers along book spines. "I keep thinking about what you said, about the treaty, about rules. What about them?" She turned to face him. "You said you don't feed without consent. How does that work?" Adrian closed his book slowly. "You want to know how vampires feed. I want to know how you feed." Elena forced herself to hold his gaze. "If I'm going to be here, I should understand what you are." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or approval. He set the book aside and leaned back, studying her with unsettling intensity. "We need blood to survive," he said finally. "Human blood is strongest, but we can subsist on animals if necessary. It's less satisfying. Like living on bread and water when you remember feasts. And consent? We ask." His mouth curved bitterly. "The old houses didn't once. They took, they hunted. They left bodies in alleys and wrote it off as plague or violence. But humans learned to hunt back. Fire, iron, daylight." He gestured at the windows. "The treaty was made 300 years ago, after the burning. We agreed to limits in exchange for secrecy." Elena moved closer, drawn by the story despite herself. "What limits?" "No hunting without permission. No turning without conclave approval. Creating new vampires destabilizes the balance. No feeding to death. No children, ever." His voice went hard on the last point. "Those are absolute laws. Break them, and your own house will execute you. And people just agree to be fed on." Adrian's laugh was soft and humorless. "You'd be surprised. There are always those drawn to danger, to power, to the promise of immortality." He paused. "We pay them, offer protection. Some become long-term donors, companions who provide regularly in exchange for wealth, security, or the thrill of it. That's horrible, is it?" He tilted his head. "They choose freely. They leave when they wish. We ensure their safety, heal their wounds, guard their secrets." His eyes found hers. "Is that worse than what your father's merchant friends do? Paying starvation wages while they feast?" Elena's jaw tightened. "That's different, is it?" The silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken challenges. Finally, Elena sank into the chair opposite his. "You said House Corvus wants war. Why?" Adrian's expression darkened. "Because peace is boring. Because the treaty restricts them. Because Dorian remembers when vampires were gods and humans were cattle." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "He's been pushing boundaries for years, feeding too often from the same donors, hunting in gray areas, recruiting humans to break our laws for him. The Conclave has ignored it because House Corvus is old, powerful. Because starting a house war would destroy everything, and I became a pawn in that. You became proof that House Corvus will break treaty law openly." Adrian's gaze was steady, serious. "That's why you're valuable, Elena. Why you're dangerous. If I present you to the Conclave as evidence a human they tried to take without consent, it forces the other houses to act." Elena's blood went cold. "You're going to use me. I'm going to protect you." He stood abruptly, moving to the window. "But yes, your testimony could change everything. Could force the Conclave to finally reign in House Corvus. And if they don't?" He didn't answer. Didn't need to. The implication hung heavy as smoke. If the Conclave didn't act, she remained a target. A loose end. A human who knew too much. Elena rose slowly, her hands clenched in the fabric of her borrowed dress. "You should have let them kill me. It would have been simpler." Adrian turned, and the look on his face stopped her breath. "Don't," he said quietly, fiercely. "Don't say that. Don't ever say that. Why do you care? The words burst out before she could stop them. I'm human. I'm temporary. I'm nothing to you. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides too fast, too inhuman, and stopped inches away, his hands raised as if to touch her face, then falling. His eyes burned. You're not nothing, he said, and his voice cracked around the edges. You're angry and brave and alive, and I haven't felt alive in a century. Then he stepped back, his expression shuddering, closed. Sleep, he said. Tomorrow the conclave meets. After that, we'll know what comes next. He left her standing in the lamplight, her heart racing, her mind spinning with questions she didn't dare voice. Chapter 4. Small Mercius conclave meeting was postponed. Adrian delivered the news at dusk, standing in the doorway of the library, where Elena had spent most of the day pretending to read. His expression was carved from stone, unreadable. House Corvus requested a delay, he said. They claim they need time to gather evidence for their counter-arguments. The conclave granted them 2 weeks. Elena's book slipped from her fingers. 2 weeks. I'm sorry. 2 more weeks trapped here. She stood, pacing to the window. 2 more weeks of waiting to learn if I'm valuable enough to keep alive. Elena, don't. She pressed her forehead against cold glass. Just don't. He left without another word. That night, Elena couldn't bear the silence. She wandered the corridors restlessly, trailing her fingers along stone walls, counting doors, mapping the labyrinth of Nightshade House. When she found herself outside Adrian's study, a room she'd glimpsed but never entered, she hesitated, only a moment before knocking. Come in. He sat at a massive desk covered in papers, his shirt sleeves rolled up, dark hair falling across his forehead. He looked tired, which seemed impossible for a creature who didn't sleep the way humans did. I need something to do, Elena said without preamble. I can't just sit in that room for 2 weeks. I'll go mad. Adrian set down his pen slowly. What did you do before? In your old life? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that since the accusations who she'd been before she became a scandal. I managed my father's household accounts, she said quietly. Planned dinners. Negotiated with suppliers. Kept the estate running while he focused on his merchant dealings. She lifted her chin. I was good at it. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. I have 3 centuries of house records that need organizing, he said. Financial accounts, blood oath contracts, treaty documents. My last assistant left 50 years ago. I've been managing alone since then, and it shows. Elena blinked. You're offering me work? I'm offering you purpose. He gestured at the chaos surrounding him, ledgers stacked haphazardly, papers threatening to slide onto the floor, ink bottles clustered like a small city. If you're willing. She was across the room before she'd made a conscious decision, already assessing the disaster with practiced eyes. This is appalling. How do you find anything? With difficulty. His mouth quirked, and considerable cursing, despite everything, despite fear and uncertainty and the wrongness of standing in a vampire's study. Elena laughed. The work began the next evening. Adrian cleared a smaller desk for her, providing ledgers and careful explanations of vampire accounting practices. Blood oath contracts, she learned, were measured in decades. Feeding agreements included clauses about frequency, location, compensation. House expenses covered everything from property maintenance to bribes paid to city officials who looked the other way. It was simultaneously mundane and surreal bureaucracy mixed with immortality. They fell into a rhythm. Elena, working in focused silence, occasionally asking questions. Adrian answering patiently, his voice low and careful. Sometimes hours passed with no words at all, just the scratch of pens and rustle of paper. On the 3rd night, Elena found an error in a century-old ledger. This doesn't balance, she said, frowning at the numbers. Someone recorded a payment of 500 gold sovereigns to House Meridian, but there's no corresponding expense recorded. Adrian looked up from his own work. Show me. She brought the ledger to his desk, leaning over his shoulder to point out the discrepancy. She was close enough to feel the coldness radiating from him, close enough to notice. He smelled like night air and something sharp, sandalwood. Maybe or cedar. He went very still. You're right, he said, after a moment, his voice strained. That's actually impressive. I've looked at these records a dozen times and never caught it. You weren't looking for patterns. Elena straightened, putting distance between them. You were just recording. I'm analyzing. His eyes found hers, and in the lamplight they looked almost human, dark brown instead of blood red. You have a gift for this. I had practice. She returned to her desk, fighting the flush creeping up her neck. My father's business required precise accounting. One mistake could mean ruin. Is that what happened? Adrian asked quietly. A mistake in the books? Elena's hands stilled. She hadn't talked about it, not to him, not to anyone. The memory was a wound still too fresh to touch, but something about the darkness, the shared silence of their work, loosened her tongue. My sister wanted my fiancé, she said, staring at her hands. He was a magistrate's son, wealthy, connected. She thought if I was gone, disgraced, he'd turn to her instead. Her laugh was bitter. She was probably right. What did she do? Planted evidence. Made it look like I'd been stealing from noble houses, from the church. She knew exactly where to hide things, how to make it convincing. Elena's throat tightened. My own father believed her. Didn't even question it. Just told me to leave before I ruined the family name. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. I had a brother once, Adrian said finally. Younger. Human. I was turned before he was born. I watched him grow from a distance, sent money anonymously, made sure he was safe. He set down his pen carefully. When I finally revealed myself, hoping he'd understand, hoping blood meant something, he tried to burn down my house with me inside it. Elena looked up sharply. He didn't succeed, Adrian continued, his voice hollow. I escaped. He didn't. The fire spread faster than he expected. His hands clenched. I could have saved him, could have pulled him from the flames, but he was screaming that I was a monster, an abomination, and I just stood there, listened to him burn. Adrian, that was 200 years ago, he said. I still hear it sometimes. His screams. Elena crossed the room without thinking, standing beside his chair. She didn't touch him, didn't dare, but her presence was a statement. I'm here. I'm listening. Betrayal by blood is the worst kind, she said softly, because you can't unknow them, can't unmake the bond. He looked up at her, and his expression was raw, vulnerable, more human than she'd ever seen him. No, he agreed. You can't. They stood like that for a long moment, two wounded creatures finding unexpected recognition in each other's pain. Then Adrian cleared his throat, composing himself with visible effort. It's late. You should rest. So should you. His smile was sad. I don't rest, Elena. I just exist. She wanted to argue, to tell him that was a terrible way to live. But she was a fugitive in a vampire's house, waiting to see if she'd be valuable enough to spare. She had no room to judge how others survived their centuries. Tomorrow, she said instead, I'll tackle the blood oath contracts. They're a disaster. Tomorrow, he agreed. Elena left him surrounded by paperwork and lamplight. But she carried something new with her into the darkness, the beginning of understanding. Fragile as spider silk and twice as dangerous. Chapter 5. The weight of Worth message came at midnight. Elena was alone in the study, wrestling with a blood oath contract written in Latin so archaic even Adrian had needed to consult 3 dictionaries. She heard the sound first, a soft thud against glass, deliberate and sharp. She froze. The sound came again. Not wind, not accident. Something being thrown at the window. Elena moved to the glass cautiously, peering into the darkness beyond. The courtyard below was empty, shadows pooling between ancient statues and overgrown hedges. But there, on the windowsill outside, lay a stone wrapped in paper. Her hands trembled as she opened the window and retrieved it. The paper was heavy parchment, sealed with black wax stamped with a raven, the symbol of House Corvus. Elena's stomach turned cold as she broke the seal. To the mortal sheltering in Nightshade House. You think yourself safe behind Adrian's walls. You are mistaken. Guest right is tradition, not law. These stones will not protect you when war comes. House Nightshade stands alone. House Meridian and House Sable have pledged neutrality. When the conclave meets, we will present evidence of Adrian's crimes, harboring a thief, interfering in legal house business, threatening violence over human cattle. He will fall. His house will burn, and you will face justice for the theft that damned you. But there is another path. Come to House Corvus willingly. Testify that Adrian took you by force, that he feeds without consent, that he breaks the treaty. Do this, and we will ensure your safe passage from Ashenfell. We will clear your name, restore your reputation, return you to your family. Refuse, and you burn with him. You have 3 days to decide. Dorian. Lord of House Corvus. Elena's fingers tightened on the parchment, crumpling it. The words blurred as her vision swam with rage and fear in equal measure. Elena? She spun. Adrian stood in the doorway, his expression sharp with concern. He crossed to her in 3 strides, moving with that impossible speed, and his eyes dropped to the message in her shaking hands. May I? She handed it over wordlessly. His face went cold as marble as he read. When he finished, his hands had begun to tremble the first time Elena had seen him lose control. The parchment crumbled to ash between his fingers, disintegrating as if burned from within. He's threatening you, Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. Threatening to expose your past, to use the very accusations that drove you here against you. He stopped, jaw clenched. That's unforgivable. He's offering me freedom. Elena's voice came out hollow. My name cleared. My life back. Adrian went very still. Yes. Do you believe him? No, the word was immediate, certain. Dorian doesn't make bargains, he makes traps. If you went to him, he'd use your testimony to destroy me, then kill you to eliminate the witness. You'd never leave House Corvus alive. Elena moved to the window, staring into darkness. But his other threats, about the conclave, about you standing alone. She turned to face him. Are those true? Adrian's silence was answer enough. Adrian, House Meridian, and House Sable have been neutral for decades, he said finally, moving to the desk where maps of Ashenfell lay spread across the surface. They won't risk war unless forced. Which means when the conclave meets, it will be House Nightshade against House Corvus, with the other houses watching to see who wins. How many vampires does House Corvus have? 43. Adrian's finger traced the map, marking territories. House Nightshade has 18. We're the smallest house in Ashenfell by design. I've always preferred quality over quantity. His smile was bitter. A philosophy that may prove fatal. Elena's mind raced, analyzing the problem the way she'd analyzed her father's business challenges. If it comes to war, what are your advantages? He looked at her sharply. This isn't your battle. I'm the reason it's happening. She moved to the desk, studying the map. So tell me, what are your advantages? Adrian hesitated, then leaned over the map, his shoulder nearly touching hers. Nightshade House is defensible, thick walls, limited entrances, warded against hostile magic. We have the high ground, literally. And my people are older, more experienced. Dorian's house is filled with young vampires, newly turned, aggressive, but undisciplined. But he has numbers, yes, and allies if you fall. Other houses that would rather see House Corvus in power than risk opposing them. Yes, Adrian's voice was grim. If I lose, the treaty dies with me. House Corvus will return to the old ways, hunting freely, turning humans by the dozens, treating your people as livestock. The balance we've maintained for 3 centuries will collapse. Elena stared at the map, at the markers showing vampire territory spreading across Ashenfell like a cancer. How many people walked those streets unknowing? How many went about their lives never suspecting that monsters negotiated their fates in the darkness? We need leverage, she said quietly. Something that forces the other houses to support you. Something that makes neutrality impossible. Elena, this isn't. My father taught me that in business. The winner isn't the one with the most resources. She met Adrian's eyes steadily. It's the one who understands what people value. What are the other houses afraid of? Adrian studied her for a long moment, something like wonder crossing his face. Exposure, he said slowly. The other houses fear humans learning about us more than they fear House Corvus. The burning 300 years ago nearly destroyed us all. They'll do anything to prevent that from happening again. Then we threaten exposure. Elena's mind was spinning now, pieces falling into place. Not actually do it, but make them believe House Corvus's actions will lead to discovery. Make them choose between supporting you or risking another burning. How? She turned to face him fully. Dorian's been breaking treaty rules for years, you said so yourself. Hunting in gray areas, feeding too often, recruiting humans to break laws. That's dangerous. That's the kind of behavior that leaves witnesses, creates rumors. Her pulse quickened. What if those rumors reached the right ears? City magistrates, church officials, people with power to investigate. You want to expose House Corvus to humans? No, I want to threaten to expose them. Make the other houses believe you'll do it if they don't intervene. Elena's hands clenched. Force them to reign in House Corvus or risk everything. Adrian's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, consideration, something that might have been admiration. That's brilliant, he said softly. And incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than war? Different dangerous. He moved closer, his eyes searching hers. If we do this, there's no going back. You'd be making yourself a permanent enemy of House Corvus. Even if we win, even if you leave Ashenfell, they'd hunt you for the rest of your life. Elena thought of her sister's false tears, her father's cold dismissal, the life she'd lost to betrayal. She thought of the humans walking Ashenfell streets, unaware of the predators negotiating their fates. She thought of Adrian's raw confession about his brother, the weight of 200 years of guilt. I'm already a permanent enemy, she said. I might as well make it count for something. Adrian's hand lifted as if to touch her face, then stopped, hovering in the air between them. Why? He asked, his voice rough. Why risk yourself for this? For me? Because you see me, Elena wanted to say. Because you listen when I speak. Because you gave me purpose when I had nothing. Because somewhere in the past week, you stopped being a monster and became simply someone. But those words were too dangerous to speak aloud. Because it's the right thing to do, she said instead. And I'm tired of running. Adrian's hand fell. His eyes held hers for a heartbeat longer, burning with something she couldn't name. Then he stepped back, his expression shuddering into determination. Then we have work to do, he said. And only 3 days to do it. They bent over the maps together as midnight deepened around them, two unlikely allies planning a war neither wanted, but both would fight. Chapter 6. Blood and binding truth came at dawn. Elena had worked through the night, compiling evidence from Adrian's records, dates when House Corvus vampires had been reported in daylight districts, testimony from donors who'd been fed on without proper contracts, financial transactions that suggested bribery of city officials. It was damning. If one knew how to read it. She'd fallen asleep at her desk, exhausted, surrounded by papers. When she woke, Adrian was sitting across from her, so still he might have been carved from stone. Gray light filtered through the curtains, painting him in shades of shadow. His eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You should be sleeping, Elena said, her voice rough with sleep. Daylight, I don't sleep during the day. That's a myth. His voice was quiet, careful. I'm weaker, slower, more vulnerable. But I don't lose consciousness. He leaned forward slightly. I've been watching you work for 3 hours. You didn't notice? A chill ran down Elena's spine, not fear exactly, but awareness of the predator sharing her space. That's unsettling. I know. His mouth quirked without humor. Everything about what I am is unsettling, Elena. That's what I need you to understand before we go any further with this plan. She sat up straighter, pushing hair from her face. What do you mean? Adrian rose and moved to the window, keeping to the shadows where gray light couldn't reach. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. I told you I was turned. I didn't tell you how or why, or what it cost. He pressed one pale hand against the stone wall. I was 26, a scholar studying ancient languages at the university in Prague. I'd discovered references to a text, a grimoire supposedly containing rituals from before the Christian church. I was obsessed with finding it. Elena listened, afraid to interrupt. A woman approached me, beautiful, cultured, interested in my research. She said she knew where the grimoire was hidden. His laugh was bitter. I was arrogant enough to follow her, stupid enough to drink the wine she offered. When I woke, I was in a crypt beneath the city, and she was. He stopped. She was draining me, drinking until my heart struggled to beat. Adrian, she told me I had a choice. Die, or drink from her in return. Become what she was, or become nothing. His hand clenched against stone. I chose survival. I always choose survival. That's what I am, Elena, a creature whose fundamental nature is to preserve itself at any cost. Elena stood slowly, moving toward him. That's not what I've seen. Then you haven't been paying attention. He turned, and his eyes were bright red now and human, reflecting the dim light like a cat's. I told you I can hear your heartbeat from rooms away. I can smell the blood beneath your skin. I know you cut your finger on paper yesterday afternoon because I could taste it in the air. His voice dropped. Do you understand? Every moment you're near me, every breath you take, is a test of control. I might fail, but you don't fail, Elena said steadily. You haven't, not once, yet. The word hung heavy. The treaty exists because vampires do fail. Because we're predators wearing human faces and eventually, the hunger wins. It always wins. Elena processed this, her analytical mind turning over the implications. Then why maintain the illusion? Why follow the treaty at all if it's inevitable? Because some of us remember what it was like to be human. Adrian's expression softened, became almost sad. Because we remember fear and love and hope, and we cling to those memories like drowning men cling to driftwood. The treaty gives us rules, structure, a way to be monsters without being monstrous. He met her eyes. But it's fragile, Elena, so fragile. And if House Corvus breaks it, if they return to hunting freely, the rest of us will follow. Because it's easier. Because it's what we are. No, Elena's voice was firm. What you are is someone who saved my life when he could have walked away. Someone who gave me purpose when I had none. Someone who shared his pain with me because he understood mine. She moved closer, close enough to feel the coldness radiating from him. You're not just hunger and control. You're also grief and honor and 300 years of choosing to be better. Adrian stared at her, something breaking open in his expression. You don't know what you're saying, he whispered. You don't know what you do to me. Then tell me. The silence stretched between them. Taut as a drawn bowstring. In 300 years, Adrian said finally, his voice raw. I've had donors, companions, humans who traded blood for money or safety or the thrill. I've had other vampires as allies, enemies, occasional lovers. But I haven't had a friend, Elena. I haven't had someone who sees what I am and stays anyway. Elena's throat tightened. Is that what I am? A friend? I don't know. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, not quite touching. I don't know what you are. I only know that when you're here, the house feels less empty. When you laugh, I remember what joy sounds like. When you challenge me, I remember why I wanted to be more than a monster. His hand fell. And that terrifies me. Why? Because you're mortal. The words cracked. Because in 60 years, maybe 70 if you're lucky, you'll be dust. And I'll still be here, still existing, still remembering the way you looked at me, like I was worth saving. Elena reached up slowly, carefully, and took his cold hand in both of hers. He flinched, but didn't pull away. Then we have 60 years, she said. Maybe 70. That's more than most people get. Elena, I know what you are, Adrian. Monster, predator, creature of night, I know. But I also know you've chosen, every day for 300 years, to be more than that. And that matters. She squeezed his hand gently. It matters to me. He looked at their joined hands like he'd never seen such a thing. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. If we do this, if we go to war with House Corvus, they'll try to kill you. Not just threaten. Not just intimidate. They'll send assassins, use magic, burn this house to ash with you inside if they can. I know, and you still want to help me. I still want to help you. Adrian's other hand came up, cradling her face with devastating gentleness. His skin was ice cold, his touch careful, as if she might shatter. Then I need to tell you the rest, he said. About blood oaths. About what it means to be bound to a vampire house. Because if you're going to stand with me, if you're truly committed to this plan, there's a way to protect you. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. But it requires blood, and trust, and a kind of intimacy that can't be undone. Elena's heart raced, but she didn't step back. Tell me. So he did. He explained blood oaths in detail, how a vampire could bind a human with their blood, creating a connection that offered protection, enhanced healing, a thread of awareness between them. How the human would taste the vampire's emotions, feel their presence. How the bond could deepen over time into something more profound, more permanent. How? It was nothing like being turned. But it was still a chain. If you accept this, Adrian finished, House Corvus can't touch you without breaking fundamental law. You'd be under House Nightshade's protection in a way that even other vampires must respect. His eyes searched hers. But you'd also be mine in a way. Bound to me, connected. And I don't know if that's a gift or a curse. Elena thought about her sister's betrayal, her father's coldness, the life she'd lost. She thought about the past week working beside Adrian, finding unexpected companionship in the darkness. She thought about the war coming, and the humans who would suffer if House Corvus won. How do we do it? She asked. Adrian's expression shifted surprise, concern, and something that might have been hope. Are you certain? I'm certain I won't let them win, Elena said firmly. I'm certain I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in years. And I'm certain that if we're going to war, I'd rather fight beside you than hide behind you. His smile was sad and beautiful and entirely human. Then we begin, he said, with blood. Chapter 7. The breaking point ritual was simpler than Elena expected. Adrian led her to a small chamber she hadn't seen before, windowless, lit by candles that cast dancing shadows on stone walls covered in symbols she couldn't read. A silver knife lay on a velvet cloth beside a crystal goblet that caught the light like frozen starlight. The blood oath is ancient, Adrian explained, his voice reverent. Older than the treaty, older than the houses themselves. It creates a bond of protection and loyalty between vampire and human. But Elena, he turned to face her fully. Once done, it can't be easily broken. You'll carry a trace of me in your veins for the rest of your life. You'll feel when I'm near, sense my emotions when they're strong. And he stopped. I'll know if you're hurt, afraid, in danger, always. That doesn't sound like a curse, Elena said quietly. It is, if you ever want to be free of me. She met his eyes steadily. Then I won't want that. Adrian's expression flickered with emotion too complex to name. He picked up the knife, testing its edge with his thumb. A bead of dark blood welled up, impossibly red, against his pale skin. Your hand, he said softly. Elena extended her right hand, palm up. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. What do I do? Trust me. Adrian took her hand gently in his, positioning the knife. This will hurt. I'm sorry for that. The blade sliced cleanly across her palm, a shallow cut, precise and controlled. Pain bloomed hot and sharp, and blood welled up immediately, dripping into the crystal goblet Adrian held beneath her hand. Now me, he said, and cut his own palm with the same efficiency. His blood was darker than hers, almost black in the candlelight, and it moved strangely too thick, too slow, like liquid shadow. He held his hand over the goblet, letting his blood mix with hers. Where they touched, the mixture began to glow, a soft, silvery light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Adrian spoke then, words in a language Elena didn't recognize. Latin, perhaps, or something older. His voice resonated in the small chamber, seeming to come from everywhere at once. When he finished, he lifted the goblet to his lips and drank half the mixture. His eyes closed, and Elena saw a shudder run through him, pleasure or pain. She couldn't tell. Then he offered the goblet to her. Elena took it with her uninjured hand. The mixture inside still glowed faintly, illuminating her face from below. It smelled of copper and night air and something indefinably other. Once you drink, Adrian warned, there's no going back. Elena didn't hesitate. She lifted the goblet and drank. The taste was overwhelming, salt and iron and something electric that made her teeth ache. It burned going down, not with heat, but with cold, as if she'd swallowed winter starlight. The sensation spread through her chest, her limbs, her fingers and toes, until her entire body hummed with it. Then the world shifted. Elena gasped as sensation flooded her, Adrian's presence blazing in her awareness like a beacon in darkness. She could feel him, his concern, his hope, his carefully controlled hunger, his bone-deep loneliness, easing like a wound finally beginning to heal. It was overwhelming, intimate, like being turned inside out and seeing herself reflected in his ancient eyes. Breathe, Adrian said, and his voice came both from outside and somehow from within her. Just breathe. It will settle. Elena, focused on breathing, on the stone floor beneath her feet, on Adrian's hand, still holding hers. Slowly, the overwhelming rush of sensation ebbed to something manageable, a constant awareness of him, warm and solid, connected to her by invisible threads. I feel you, she whispered. I feel everything. I know. His thumb traced her uninjured palm. I feel you too. Your heart racing. Your fear mixed with wonder. Your determination like steel beneath everything else. His voice dropped. You're extraordinary, Elena. You know that? Before she could respond, the house shook. The candles guttered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Adrian's head snapped up, his expression going cold and deadly. They're here, he said. House Corvus. They're not waiting 3 days. Elena's new awareness of him blazed with alarm, his fury, his fear for her, his instant shift into predator mode. How many? Too many. He was moving already, pulling her toward the door. They've broken the siege ward. That should have been impossible. They burst into the corridor to find chaos. Adrian's household. Vampires, 18 of them, Elena remembered, were scrambling to defensive positions. She saw a woman with silver hair directing 3 others to the eastern wing. A young man, barely older than 20, sealing a doorway with blood runes. An ancient-looking vampire in archaic clothing barking orders in a language that made Elena's ears ache. Adrian. The silver-haired woman appeared at his side, moving with that impossible vampire speed. They have a witch. That's how they broke the ward. She's still outside, maintaining a breach in the eastern wall. How many vampires? 20 so far. More coming. Her eyes flickered to Elena, widened slightly at whatever she sensed. You oath-bound her, now? Yes, Mira, now. Adrian's voice was steel. Which makes her house Nightshade. Protect her as you would me. Mira nodded sharply. The safe room, no. Elena's voice cut through. If they have a witch, they can find any hiding place. I need to help. You're human, Mira said flatly. I'm also the reason they're attacking. Elena turned to Adrian, gripping his arm. Through the bond, she felt his immediate refusal forming. Listen to me. They want me alive. I'm evidence they need. That makes me valuable. That makes me leverage. Absolutely not the witch, Elena interrupted. She's human, maintaining a spell from outside. Humans have weaknesses. Vampires don't. Daylight, exhaustion, distraction. Her mind raced, analyzing like she'd analyzed her father's business problems. If I can reach her, disrupt her concentration for just a moment, your wards would snap back into place. You could trap most of House Corvus's forces inside and pick them off. Adrian stared at her, torn between admiration and horror. Through the bond, Elena felt both emotions warring in him. You'd have to cross the courtyard, he said slowly. In the dark, with vampire assassins hunting you. Then I'll need a distraction. Elena looked at Mira. Can you give me that? Mira's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. I like her, Adrian. She's insane, but I like her. She turned to the younger vampire. Marcus, gather a strike team. We're going to give our newest house member a chance to save all our lives. Mira, she's right. Mira's expression was grim. The witch is the linchpin. Break her concentration, and we turn this siege into a slaughter. Our slaughter of them. Another explosion rocked the house. Somewhere above, Elena heard screaming humans screaming, which meant House Corvus had brought donors as fodder. The cruelty of it made her stomach turn. Adrian's hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. Through the bond, his fear for her was a living thing, almost drowning out everything else. If you die, he said, his voice breaking, I will burn House Corvus to ash. Every vampire, every donor, every stone of their hall. Do you understand? Then don't let me die, Elena said simply. Fight for me the way I'm fighting for you. His kiss was sudden, fierce, desperately gentle, cold lips against hers for one heartbeat, conveying more than words could. Then he pulled back, his eyes blazing red. Mira, he said, keep her alive, with my unlife. Mira promised. They moved as one toward the chaos, toward the siege, toward a battle that would determine not just their fates, but the future of every human walking Ashenfell's streets. And knowing, Elena's hand found the small knife at her belt, not much of a weapon, but it was hers. Through the blood oath bond, she felt Adrian's presence like a shield at her back. She wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. Chapter 8, Ashes and Aftermath. The courtyard was a war zone. Mira led Elena through a servant's passage that opened into shadows behind an overgrown hedge. From there, Elena could see the chaos, vampires fighting with inhuman speed, their movements too fast to track. Bodies both vampire and human lay crumpled on ancient stones, and in the center, protected by 3 House Corvus vampires, stood the witch. She was younger than Elena expected, maybe 30, dressed in black robes. Her hands raised as she chanted in a steady, monotone voice. Blood dripped from cuts on her palms, feeding the spell that kept a shimmering breach open in Nightshade House's eastern wall. Through it, more vampires poured like a flood. She's good, Mira muttered. Strong. Breaking her concentration won't be easy. Elena studied the scene with the same analytical focus she'd brought to her father's accounts. The witch's eyes were closed, her body swaying slightly with exhaustion. The 3 vampire guards stood in a defensive triangle, watching for threats from House Nightshade's forces, but all watching inward, toward the main battle. None of them were watching the shadows behind. I need something to throw, Elena whispered. Something heavy enough to hurt. Mira's smile was predatory. She reached down and pried loose a cobblestone from the path, handing it to Elena. Make it count. Through the bond, Elena felt Adrian's presence blazing somewhere in the main hall, fighting, desperate, holding back impossible numbers. His fear for her pulsed like a second heartbeat, but beneath it was trust. He believed she could do this. Elena weighed the stone in her hand, judged the distance, and threw. Her aim was true. The cobblestone struck the witch's shoulder with a sickening crack. The woman's eyes flew open, her chant breaking on a scream of pain. For one crucial second, her concentration shattered. The breach in the ward collapsed like a soap bubble bursting. The effect was immediate and devastating. The shimmering opening slammed shut, and the ward's power surged back in a wave of silver light that knocked 3 attacking vampires off their feet. Those House Corvus vampires already inside were suddenly trapped, cut off from reinforcements, and Adrian's household descended on them like wolves. Elena watched from the shadows as the battle turned. What had been a desperate defense became a slaughter. House Nightshade's vampires, fighting on their own ground with their wards restored, were terrifying. She saw Mira rip the throat from a House Corvus vampire with her bare teeth, saw Marcus move so fast he seemed to teleport, appearing behind enemies and ending them before they could turn, saw Adrian cutting through attackers like a force of nature, ancient and unstoppable and beautiful in his terrible fury. The witch tried to restart her spell, but one of her vampire guards was already fleeing. Another fell to Marcus's blade. The third turned to defend her and Mira was there, dragging him into shadow. The witch ran. Elena didn't think. She simply moved, bursting from cover and sprinting across the courtyard. The witch was injured, exhausted, stumbling. Elena was younger, faster, fueled by adrenaline and the blood oath thrumming in her veins. She caught the witch at the garden wall, grabbing her robe and yanking her backward. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and fabric. Stop. Elena gasped, pinning the woman's arms. Stop fighting. It's over. The witch bucked beneath her, surprisingly strong. Get off me. They'll kill me for failing, then don't go back to them. Elena tightened her grip. You're human, like me. How could you help them? The witch's eyes were wild with terror. You don't understand. Dorian owns me. Blood debt. I had no choice, there's always a choice. Elena felt Adrian's presence getting closer, felt his relief through the bond that she was alive, unharmed. House Nightshade doesn't enslave humans. Help us, and we'll protect you. You can't protect me from Dorian. Watch me. Adrian appeared beside them, moving from nothing into solidity. Blood splattered his clothes and face, not his own. Elena knew through the bond. He looked down at the witch with cold assessment. She maintained the breach, he said flatly. She's guilty of enabling an illegal siege. She's also a prisoner, Elena countered. Blood debt. Dorian forced her. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. He crouched beside them, studying the witch with new eyes. Show me your wrist. The witch hesitated, then extended her left arm. There, burned into her skin, was a mark Elena recognized from the house records, the Raven of House Corvus, surrounded by runes of binding. A blood brand, Adrian said softly. He owns her completely. He met Elena's eyes. If we kill her, we're no better than he is, so we keep her. Elena helped the witch sit up. We break the brand. We give her the choice. Dorian never did. Through the bond, Elena felt Adrian's emotions shifting from cold fury to something warmer. Pride, perhaps, or wonder at her continued faith and mercy. What's your name? He asked the witch gently. Celeste. Her voice was barely a whisper. Celeste, I'm Adrian, Lord of House Nightshade. The human you tried to help kill is Elena, who is now blood oath bound to my house. He offered his hand to help her stand. You have two options. Return to Dorian and face his punishment for failure, or stay here under my protection while we find a way to break your brand. Celeste stared at his hand like it might be a trap. Why would you help me? Because Elena asked me to. Adrian's smile was slight but genuine. And I've learned not to ignore her instincts. Slowly, Celeste took his hand. The battle was ending. Around the courtyard, House Corvus, vampires were either dead, fleeing, or surrendering. Mira approached, wiping blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. We captured 5, she reported, including Dorian's second, Marcus. The rest are ash or fled. Her eyes found Elena. Your plan worked. The ward collapsing trapped them. We lost 3 of ours, but they lost 26. Her smile was sharp. House Corvus will remember this. Good, Adrian said coldly. Let them remember that House Nightshade protects its own. Elena felt exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the reality of what she'd just done: thrown a stone at a witch, disrupted a battle, saved lives. Her hands were shaking. Adrian noticed immediately. Through the bond, his concern blazed bright. inside, he said, his arm coming around her shoulders. You need rest, food, you're human. Elena, you can't fight battles without consequences. I'm fine, you're trembling. His voice was gentle but firm. And you haven't eaten in 12 hours. Don't make me carry you. Despite everything, Elena laughed a slightly hysterical sound. You're worried about me after that? I'm always worried about you. He guided her toward the house, Mira and Celeste following. That's what the blood oath means. Your pain is my pain. Your fear is my fear. Your victory, his voice softened. Your victory is the first good thing I've felt in decades. They passed through doors held open by House Nightshade vampires, who nodded respectfully to Elena. Now, she'd proven herself in battle. Saved them with human ingenuity when vampire strength wasn't enough. She was one of them now. For better or worse, Adrian led her to a sitting room where fire burned in the hearth, real warmth, real comfort. He settled her into a chair, wrapped her in a blanket, and disappeared to fetch food. Mira stayed, silent guard by the door. Celeste huddled in a corner, still terrified, but alive. Through the bond, Elena felt Adrian's presence moving through the house, checking on his people, counting the dead, preparing for what came next. When he returned with bread and cheese and wine, his expression was grim. This was just the opening move, he said quietly, kneeling beside her chair. Dorian tested our defenses, found them stronger than expected. He'll regroup, plan better, attack again. Then we plan better too. Elena took his cold hand in her warm one. Together, his fingers tightened around hers. Through the bond, she felt his emotions, gratitude, fear, something deeper that neither of them dared name yet. Together, he agreed, but outside, in the darkness beyond, Nightshade houses restored wards. Dorian was watching, planning, preparing to destroy the vampire lord who dared defy him and the human woman who'd become his greatest weakness. The war had only just begun. Chapter 9. Between battles, 5 days passed in uneasy peace. Elena woke each evening to find Adrian already awake, standing at windows or bent over maps, planning defenses for the next attack. They both knew it was coming. House Corvus wouldn't let the failed siege go unanswered, but in the quiet hours between dusk and midnight, something unexpected bloomed. On the first night, Adrian taught her about vampire history. They sat in the library, fire crackling in the hearth, unnecessary for him, but he'd learned she liked the warmth. He showed her ancient texts written in languages she couldn't read, translating passages about the first vampires, the courts that rose and fell, the wars that shaped their hidden world. We weren't always organized, he explained, his finger tracing an illuminated manuscript. For centuries, vampires were solitary hunters, territorial. We killed each other as often as we killed humans. He turned the page carefully. Then came the conclave, 7 ancient vampires who decided structure was better than chaos. They created the houses, established territories, wrote the first laws. When was this? Elena leaned closer, studying the intricate artwork. 1400 years ago, give or take. His smile was slight. Record keeping was imprecise then. Elena tried to wrap her mind around that timeline. 1400 years. When her ancestors were barely learning to farm, vampires were building governments. The woman who turned you, she asked carefully, was she part of a house? Adrian's expression shuddered. House Sable. She was ancient even then, over 1,000 years old. She turned me because I amused her. A scholar who wanted knowledge more than life. His voice went hollow. She taught me to hunt, to feed, to survive. Then she grew bored and left. I haven't seen her in 273 years. Through the bond, Elena felt the old wound of that abandonment still raw, still bleeding after centuries. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Don't be. He closed the book gently. She gave me eternity. What I did with it was my choice. On the second night, Elena taught Adrian about hope. She found him in the conservatory, standing among the dead plants she'd noticed her first day. In the lamplight, his expression was devastated. I used to keep a garden, he said, without preamble. Roses, mostly. I'd work here in the evenings, pruning and watering. It was. He struggled for words. It was something alive that needed me, something that responded to care. Elena moved to stand beside him. What happened? I let it die. His hand brushed a withered stem. After my last human companion left, she was a donor, a friend, someone who'd been with me for 30 years. I just stopped tending the garden, stopped pretending I was anything but a creature waiting for time to pass. Through the bond, his loneliness was a physical ache. We could bring it back, Elena said softly. He looked at her sharply. It's been 50 years, some of these plants might have living roots. And even if they don't, we could start fresh. Plant new seeds. She met his eyes steadily. It's not too late, Adrian. It's never too late to grow something beautiful. His expression cracked. And for a moment, he looked unbearably vulnerable. They spent that night clearing dead plants, testing soil, making lists of seeds to acquire. Adrian worked with a quiet intensity that spoke of the need to create, to nurture, to believe in futures measured in seasons instead of centuries. On the third night, they taught each other about trust. Celeste had begun emerging from her room, her blood brand still visible but fading as Adrian worked to unravel Dorian's spell. She watched Elena and Adrian with careful eyes, seeing something she clearly hadn't expected. You're different, she said suddenly. Over dinner, a meal Elena had insisted they share like civilized people, vampire or not. Different from Dorian, from House Corvus. Adrian set down his wine glass. How so? They treated humans like tools, useful, but disposable. Celeste's fingers traced her brand unconsciously. You treat her like, she paused, searching for words, like she matters. Like her thoughts and choices have weight. They do, Adrian said simply. They always should have. Elena felt warmth bloom through the bond, his genuine belief in those words, his determination to be better than the monsters who'd taught him. Later, alone in the study, she asked him about feeding. You haven't fed since I've been here, she said bluntly. At least, not that I've seen. How long can you go without blood? Adrian's jaw tightened. A while, weeks if necessary. It's unpleasant, but you're doing it because I'm here. Elena crossed her arms. Because you're afraid of losing control around me. Yes, no hesitation, no pretty lies. That's not sustainable, Adrian. If we're going to war, you need to be strong. She took a breath, steadying herself. The blood oath. Does it work both ways? Can you feed from me? Elena answered the question. He closed his eyes. Yes, the oath creates a connection that would make feeding from you easier, safer. The bond would prevent me from taking too much. He opened his eyes, and they burned red. But I won't use you that way. What if I offered? Through the bond, she felt his hunger surge, immediate, overwhelming, carefully controlled. Don't. Why not? You said vampires need consent. I'm giving it. Because I would want it too much. His voice broke. Because I already want you in ways that terrify me. And adding blood to that equation would destroy what little control I have left. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Elena crossed to where he sat, her heart pounding. What if I want you to want me? Adrian's hands clenched the chair arms. Elena, you don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She knelt beside his chair, meeting his burning gaze. I know you're a vampire. I know you could kill me without effort. I know this thing between us is complicated and dangerous and probably doomed. She placed her hand over his cold one. I also know that in the past 2 weeks, you've made me feel seen and valued and alive in ways I haven't felt in years, maybe ever. You're confusing gratitude with don't tell me what I'm feeling. Her voice was firm. I'm analytical, remember? I've examined this from every angle, and the conclusion I reach every time is that I trust you, Adrian. With my life, with my choices, with my blood, if that's what you need. He stared at her, clearly torn between desire and duty. Through the bond, she felt both warring in him. Not yet, he said finally, his voice rough. Not until you're certain. Not until this war is over, and you can choose freely, without debt or obligation. His hand turned, capturing hers. But ask me again when this is done, and I'll say yes. To feeding, to whatever else you're offering, to everything. Elena's breath caught. Promise? I promise. His thumb traced her wrist, finding her pulse. When House Corvus is defeated, when you're safe, when you've had time to understand what forever with a monster means. His smile was sad and hopeful at once. Then I'll say yes to anything you ask. On the 4th night, Mira brought news that shattered their fragile peace. The conclave meets tomorrow, she said, her expression grim. Dorian has called an emergency session. He's bringing his captured spies, the ones we thought we'd killed. He has evidence, Adrian. Evidence that you've been breaking treaty laws. Adrian went very still. What evidence? I don't know. But he's confident enough to demand your execution. Through the bond, Elena felt his fear not for himself, but for her. For his house. For For everything they'd built and stolen moments between battles. Then we go to the conclave, Elena said firmly. We present our evidence of his crimes. We force the other houses to choose. It's too dangerous, everything is dangerous. She stood, her chin lifted. But we don't face it alone anymore. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Together, he said, together. She agreed. Outside, dawn was approaching. Their brief interlude was ending. The next night would bring the conclave, and with it, the final confrontation with House Corvus. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Chapter 10. Dawn of Shoisith conclave met in the catacombs beneath Ashenfell's oldest cathedral. Elena descended stone stairs worn smooth by centuries of feet. Adrian's presence solid beside her through the bond. Behind them came Mira and 3 other House Nightshade vampires. A small honor guard that seemed pitiful compared to the forces gathered below. The chamber was vast, a circular room carved from living rock, lit by hundreds of candles that cast no warmth. 7 thrones sat in judgment. House Corvus, House Nightshade, House Sable, House Meridian, House Obsidian, House Thorn, and House Vale. Only 5 were occupied. 2 ancient houses had fallen centuries ago, their seats empty monuments to vampire mortality. Dorian sat on the Corvus throne, surrounded by his vampires. He smiled when he saw Elena, showing too many teeth. Lord Adrian, said the vampire on the central throne. House Sable, Elena recognized from Adrian's descriptions. She was ancient beyond measure, her skin like parchment, her eyes black as empty wells. You bring a human to conclave. This is irregular. She is blood oath bound to House Nightshade, Adrian said clearly. She has the right to stand with her house. She is evidence, Dorian countered, rising. Evidence of your crimes, old friend. You claimed guest right over her to prevent House Corvus from lawfully feeding. You interfered in our territory, threatened violence, and now his smile widened. Now you've oath bound her to hide the truth of what you are. Adrian's hand tightened on Elena's arm, but his voice remained steady. House Corvus attempted to feed on an unwilling human. Treaty law is clear, she was prey. Dorian gestured dismissively. A fugitive, a criminal fleeing justice. No one would have missed her. I would have, Adrian said coldly. The vampire on the Meridian throne, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, leaned forward. Lord Dorian, you admit your house attempted to feed without determining consent? Consent is implied when prey runs bleeding through our territory. Dorian's voice dripped contempt. Or has the treaty made us so weak we must ask permission to eat? Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. The treaty, said the sable vampire, her voice like wind through graves, is law. Lord Adrian, present your case. Adrian stepped forward, and Elena felt his determination through the bond. For years, House Corvus has been pushing boundaries, feeding too frequently from the same donors, hunting in gray areas, using magic to bypass protections. He gestured to where Celeste stood, her brand visible even in candlelight. They blood-branded a human witch against her will, made her a slave. She came to us voluntarily, Dorian said smoothly, offered her services in exchange for protection. Show them the brand, Elena said suddenly, her voice carrying in the vast chamber. If she came voluntarily, why does she wear the mark of ownership? All eyes turned to her. She felt the weight of ancient attention, predators assessing prey, and refused to flinch. Celeste stepped forward, extending her arm. The brand gleamed in candlelight, a mark of possession, not partnership. The Meridian vampire's expression hardened. Blood branding is forbidden except in cases of capital punishment. Why does this human wear such a mark? She tried to leave, Dorian said, unconcerned. The brand ensured she honored her commitment. That's not commitment, Elena said sharply. That's slavery. What would a human know of our laws? Dorian's eyes found hers, burning with hatred. You stand there wearing Adrian's oath mark, bound to him by blood, and dare speak of slavery? You're his creature now, his pet. You have no voice here. She has my voice, Adrian said quietly, dangerously. And through me, House Nightshade's voice. Everything she says, I affirm. The sable vampire studied them both with those bottomless eyes. Lord Adrian, you risk much for this human. Why? Adrian was silent for a long moment. Through the bond, Elena felt him choosing his words carefully, knowing everything hung on this answer. Because she showed me what I'd forgotten, he said finally. That power without restraint is tyranny. That immortality without purpose is merely existence. That we can be more than monsters if we choose to be. His hand found Elena's. House Corvus wants to return to the old ways, hunting freely, taking what we want, treating humans as cattle. If they win today, the treaty dies. And with it, any hope that we're better than the beasts humans already fear us to be. Pretty words, Dorian sneered, but ultimately meaningless. We are predators. They are prey. No amount of philosophy changes that. Then let me offer something more tangible, Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She pulled a folder from her coat, the evidence they'd compiled. Dates and locations where House Corvus vampires hunted outside their territory. Financial records showing bribes to city officials. Testimony from donors who were fed on past the point of consent. She met the sable vampire's gaze. House Corvus hasn't just pushed boundaries. They've shattered them. And if you don't act, they'll shatter the treaty itself. She handed the folder to Mira, who carried it to the central throne. The sable vampire opened it, scanning the contents with inhuman speed. Her expression never changed, but something cold entered her eyes. This evidence is comprehensive, she said slowly. Lord Dorian, how do you answer these charges? With the truth, Dorian stood, his voice ringing through the chamber. Yes, we hunt more freely than House Nightshade's cowards. Yes, we use our power as it was meant to be used. Because we remember what we are, apex predators, not parlor guests begging for scraps. He turned to address the other houses. Adrian would have us live in shadow, feeding on the willing, asking permission to exist. I say we were gods once, and we can be again. Join House Corvus. Help me tear down this treaty that chains us. Let us take back the night. Silence fell, heavy as a shroud. The Meridian vampire spoke first. I remember the burning, Lord Dorian. I remember watching half our kind die in daylight, hunted by humans we'd terrorized too long. The treaty saved us. I will not abandon it, nor I, said the vampire from House Obsidian, a young man with fierce eyes. House Corvus's actions endanger us all. I vote for censure, as do I. The Meridian vampire agreed. The sable vampire's gaze swept the chamber. 3 houses have spoken. Lord Adrian, what punishment do you seek? Adrian's voice was steady, final. Removal of Dorian as House Lord, dissolution of his blood brands, reparations to those harmed by House Corvus's actions, and a formal reaffirmation of treaty law. Harsh terms, the sable vampire observed, but perhaps necessary. I vote in favor. House Vale? The 5th throne held a vampire, so still Elena had thought it empty. Now he stirred, ancient beyond ancient. I vote to uphold the treaty. Then it is decided. The sable vampire's words fell like judgment. Lord Dorian is removed from his position. House Corvus will submit to oversight until a new lord is appointed. The treaty stands. Dorian's roar of fury shook the chamber. You condemn your own kind for humans? For cattle? We preserve our kind, the sable vampire corrected coldly, by being worthy of preservation. Remove him. House Corvus vampires moved to restrain Dorian, but he was faster. He blurred toward Adrian with murderous intent, and Elena stepped between them. Time seemed to slow. She saw Dorian's hand, clawed and deadly, driving toward her heart. Saw Adrian's expression transform to pure terror. Felt the bond between them blazing with his desperate need to save her. Then Dorian's hand stopped. Inches from her chest, the sable vampire had moved faster than thought. Her ancient hand wrapped around Dorian's wrist in a grip that made bones creak. Touch her, the ancient vampire said softly, and you die. She is oath-bound, protected by laws older than your house. Attack her, and you attack the conclave itself. Dorian stared at Elena with pure hatred. Then slowly, he stepped back. This isn't over, he promised. Yes, the sable vampire said. It is. House Corvus vampires dragged Dorian from the chamber. The other houses filed out, leaving Adrian, Elena, and Mira standing in candlelight. Adrian pulled Elena against him, his body trembling the first time she'd felt him truly shaken. Through the bond, his relief and terror and love, yes, love, undeniable, now crashed over her like a wave. Don't ever do that again, he whispered into her hair. Step between you and death? No promises. His laugh was broken. You're impossible. I'm yours. She pulled back to meet his eyes. You said when this was over, you'd say yes to anything I asked. Elena, I'm asking. Her hands framed his cold face. Not for forever. Not for immortality. Just for now. For this moment. For whatever time we have. Adrian's expression cracked open. showing everything he'd been hiding, centuries of loneliness ending, hope he'd thought dead, love he'd forgotten he could feel. Yes, he whispered, to everything, to anything, to you. He kissed her then properly, deeply, cold lips warming against hers. Through the bond, she felt his emotions twining with hers until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. When they finally pulled apart, dawn was approaching. Through the cathedral above, Elena heard church bells ringing the hour. What happens now? She asked. Adrian's smile was genuine, free, more alive than she'd ever seen him. Now we go home. We plant that garden. We rebuild. His hand found hers. And we do it together, together, Elena agreed. They climbed the stairs toward morning, leaving the darkness of the conclave behind. Above them, Ashenfell was waking a city of humans and vampires, prey and predators, all trying to survive another day.